So, directors of football, or DOFs, are crucial in creating the club structure and philosophy that, if done well, will work regardless of the personnel. I think that the DOF the owners do select answers the question, who are we and what do we want to be? Which are two questions that were asked by George Colkin, a journalist for The Athletic, when he was writing his piece about the potential candidates for DOF at Newcastle United. So in this video, we will sift through the potential candidates and ask you, the audience, to help us along this journey. So make sure you send in your questions, send in your opinions, like, share and subscribe, and let's get on with the show. So there are different types of directors, different types of roles which are suited usually to the personality of that director. So for instance, Dan Ashworth was described as holistic by George Colkin in his article, where you have some directors, for instance, that have a specialism in recruiting and scouting. Ashworth didn't have one specialism, but he was very good and still is very good at bringing people together under the vision of the club, putting all the departments together, making sure they're all in one mind in terms of how the club goes forward and the philosophy of the club is followed. And this process continuously also upgraded.
Well, I think you need longevity to actually see the fruits of your labour. It's sort of a long-term position.
Newcastle at the time desperately needed Dan Ashworth, and it was deeply disappointing when he left Newcastle prematurely for Man United. So, the current situation at Newcastle United is that the work that Dan Ashworth has started is incomplete, and the Newcastle United owners need the next DOF to have long-term ambitions at Newcastle to see this work through and to build trusting and productive relationships with Eddie Howe and his team. So, criteria for the next director of football at Newcastle United, I think what the owners will be looking for is, number one, somebody with a long-term vision to see Newcastle United as the number one team in the country and to be willing to see it through. Number two, to have a holistic approach as the Dan Ashworth had. And number three, someone who's able to bring up the youth academy. So with that said, let's check out the candidates. Right, so the first candidate is Tiago Pinto, who's actually registered an interest in the Newcastle Post, which is interesting to see. He's also the former DOF for Benfica and for Roma, where he has a very holistic style in bringing different departments together, bringing up the youth academy. Is very famous for that. This is very suitable in what Newcastle would want. He's obviously famous for bringing Marino and Tammy Abraham into Roma, where they won the Europa League together. So he has winning pedigree. This might be what interests Newcastle, but what do you guys think? Let me know. The next candidate is Phil Giles, the current director of football at Brentford. He's obviously known for his smart odds betting background in terms of recruiting players, but he's also very good at recruiting staff and putting good teams together, which is important for what the owners are looking for. The main thing is also he's a lifelong Newcastle United supporter and former season ticket holder, and that likely brings loyalty and trust and long-term ambition to Newcastle, which is something that Newcastle owners really want. Would you guys go for him? So the third and final candidate is Paul Mitchell, who's a high-level operative. He's famed for the players that he's recruited no matter what club he's gone to, and the technology that he uses, like black box and sleeping pods. But what's important about him is his blunt and decisive character. For instance, in his last position in Monaco, he reduced a squad of 77 to 39 and fired their head coach. He certainly shakes things up, and if the Newcastle owners were to bring him in, I think that's what they'll be looking to do. So let me know, guys, do you think it's time for a Paul Mitchell at Newcastle United? All right, so in conclusion, we'll go back to our earlier question that we think the owners will be asking themselves when they're looking for their new DOF. And those questions are, who are we and what do we want to be? So when they look at a Paul Mitchell, who I really began to appreciate and like as I researched him, is that when I looked at his career, he does not stay at the clubs that he's at for very long. And so Newcastle owners can't afford a person who shakes things up and is not there for the long term. Then we go on to Tiago Pinto. Tiago Pinto is a very good quality director of football who is able to bring teams together, and there's a real attraction there. But I think when they look at the fact that he hasn't before operated in England or in the Premier League, this doesn't help them to get to that next level of where they want to be. Phil Giles, I think they will find a lifelong supporter, Newcastle fan, but also someone who's very skillful at recruiting players, bringing staff, and bringing the whole ethos and philosophy of a club together, and someone obviously who's Newcastle born. He would also be able to bring your Andy House together under his wing and teach them new things, and probably be able to get Eddie Howe to warm to him too. So I think when it comes to who we want to be, I think ideally the owners want people that want to be at Newcastle, who are ready to invest in Newcastle and see the long-term project through, but also are very highly competent. And I think in Phil Giles, they have found that guy. So Phil Giles, and I agree with the owners if that's the case for a new director of football. But guys, you let me know what other candidates are there that we haven't considered. Send them in to me and I'll be happy to discuss them in my next video. And until next time guys, like, share and subscribe, and take care and God bless.